Welcome to Encouragement for Living Life with Lockwood and Lockwood. The guys are here to encourage you in your attempt to live more confidently and successfully in our world. They are highly trained and experienced mental health professionals, but they are not your mental health professional. They are sharing encouragement through information and discussion. People are complex. Just because an idea helps one person doesn't mean it will help someone else. You need to consult with your own professional who will hopefully know what is best for you and your situation. Now, it's time for Lockwood and Lockwood.
Today we're going to talk about why are people so overwhelmed?
Yeah.
What is it to be overwhelmed?
hmm
And what causes it, and then what do you do about it? Which
hmm
is the big one, obviously, for people out there. So I wrote out some kind of a note, and certainly give me some feedback on this.
Okay.
I kind of defined overwhelmed as a feeling that what you are dealing with is too much. And I said for your mind or your mind and brain to me are about the same, about equivalent, the same thing.
Yeah.
People use both languages today in the world.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the mind races or you feel really anxious or things like that would
Uh-huh.
kind of be a description of feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's important for us to let people know that everybody in the world at some points in their life will feel overwhelmed. Everybody. you
Yeah.
know, and you know what I'm saying? So anything on the definition or description of it?
I don't know. I mean, I think overwhelmed is a very general word, and so I think it'll appeal
Right,
to a lot of people, and that's
right.
good. I think there's different types of overwhelmed, right?
Okay,
And I
cool.
think thinking about it from the perspective of like, for instance, are you so overwhelmed that you feel like you have no resources, right? You feel so overwhelmed that you don't have any words anymore. You can't manage your emotions in any way, shape, or form. You're overwhelmed to the point that you're kind of hyper dysregulated. And so some people might even call that helplessness, for instance. So there's
Right,
like a version
sure.
of overwhelmed where you're experiencing helplessness, but there's also versions of feeling overwhelmed where you're not helpless. And I think just that dividing line would be useful for people because I think differentiating between when you feel overwhelmed, although you can still speak, you still can make decisions and do things, and you feel somewhat in control, right?
Right,
Emphasis
right,
on the phrase feel in control, because feeling in control is actually more psychologically relevant than actually being in control, because most of the
right.
time we actually are in control of what we can and cannot do. We can choose to react differently. However, there are periods of feeling so out of control that in many cases you are literally not in control. So, like, just to give a simple example, when you're experiencing actual trauma, like a real trauma, like you're being assaulted, you feel like your life is being threatened, so on and so forth, you are going to experience one of six prototypical responses: fight, flight, fright, fawn, freeze, and submit. And those are reactions, those are reflexes. Just like you have a patellar reflex in your knee and your elbow, you also have a psychological reflex to keep you alive. And something a lot of people that experience, for
Right.
instance, sexual trauma mistakenly believe is like, I should have fought that person off. When in reality, your brain did about 1,000 or 1,000,000 calculations in the span of like a half of a second and said, you know what, the safest thing for me right now is to freeze, even though I'm being assaulted. And people blame themselves for not having
Yeah,
like
I know.
punched the assailant in the face. When in reality, that freeze response has nothing to do with your intelligence and your self-agency. It has to do with the fact that your brain made a choice to keep you alive without your conscious consent.
You
And
bet.
so I bring up that example because a lot of people who experience trauma are erroneously believing that they should have done something differently, when in reality, your helplessness wasn't just, I feel overwhelmed. It was a literal biological reaction that you have no control over when you experience fight, flight, fright, fawn, freeze, or submit. Those are not consciously controllable. They're manageable once you notice them happening.
Well, submit too, just to comment on that one, and particularly in rape and,
Yep.
sexual abuse. And
Yeah.
Often that's a response, and then the person
Yeah.
feels horrible for submitting.
Hmm.
Yet their physiology is saying, I've got to be safe, and if I submit, I'm most safe.
Yeah, I'm most likely to not die, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And those six prototypes of reactions are not your fault. You can't choose them. You really cannot. And so your brain's doing a bunch of math super quickly in like less than half of a second to make that decision for your well-being to not die. You will
right.
experience something horrific, but survive, right? That's the math your brain is doing. And
Absolutely.
a lot of trauma survivors, rape survivors, car accident survivors, whatever, it doesn't matter what the type of trauma is specifically, they feel guilty because they should have done something differently. And that's not your choice, honestly. And so there's different types of feeling overwhelmed. And this is just kind of the extreme end of the spectrum. But
Very nice.
there's mild versions though, because like a lot of people feel temporarily situationally overwhelmed when it's like I'm watching a YouTube video or listening to a political commentator and they hear something that makes them feel unsafe or overwhelmed and then they feel like they have to talk about it or do something about it. And it's like that's actually very much in your control and not even good cause to be overwhelmed, in all honesty. But it makes sense that you would be because maybe you have mistaken expectations about the world, about yourself, about your safety, external locus of control compared to internal locus of control, for instance.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
So like,
actually go ahead,
go
go
ahead.
ahead and
No, go
finish.
ahead. No,
All
it's
right,
fine.
you actually I picked out some areas that, in terms of cause, and you went right to the most extreme, which is trauma, right?
Yeah.
Well, two other catchphrases or not areas that I came up with were also beliefs and conflicts can
Mm.
overwhelm people. That a belief
Yeah.
system that is faulty and really dysregulated can cause people to feel a lot of stuff and to an overwhelming degree sometimes. Same with conflicts. An example
Mm.
with conflict would be, yeah, I want to succeed, but the conflict with the other part of you, you might believe you don't deserve to succeed. And
Right.
that creates a conflict inside, therefore generating feelings again, because I think we come back with feeling overwhelmed to feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that person's in turmoil. They feel guilty about wanting to succeed, and they have to live with it, feeling guilty if they don't know how to resolve the conflict, and that eventually could feel so intense it feels overwhelming to them. Or
Yeah.
they have two or three or more conflicts like that going on at the same time.
Yeah,
So multiple different things go on at the same time.
yeah, for sure. I think it's extremely likely, very likely, that the average person on the planet will have a variety of conflicts. If you take a very old school psychodynamic, psychoanalytic view of the human mind and how people
Right.
work, even if you're a relatively well-adjusted person, you'll still have conflicts. Being
Right.
a healthier person doesn't mean being conflict free. Being a
Right.
healthier person means just having adult, reasonable, values-driven ways of managing your conflicts that allow you to function in your world effectively. And so, um,
Right.
it's really hard for people just generally to deal with conflicts. I don't think that's unique to mental illness at all in any way, shape, or form. I think the average person who will listen to this podcast will have, dozens of conflicts in a given day, if not even a given hour, because they're dealing with their spouse or their friends or a work thing or a pet
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
an existential crisis or a political thing or, just dozens and dozens and dozens of things that can make us feel maybe minimally overwhelmed, right? You might call it anxious or worried or whatever word you like, but it's like this sense of like
Right.
I feel internally a little bit out of control and having a hard time regulating whatever is happening inside. And the antecedent to that might be something like, you know, uh, do I take this work call right now? Do I end this work call? Do I talk to this person later? Do I whatever? It could be something that simple, or it could be something really big, like who do I vote for, or what do I do with my spouse, or it could be It could be all sorts of things, and that's not weird. And so, getting a handle, in my experience at least, getting a handle on the ordinary experiences of feeling overwhelmed, where it's like, do I go get coffee now, or do I save the money? Like little stuff like that is it, because that's little. Like, in my life, I'm blessed enough that like I can think like, should I burn $7 right now? Or should I, because I can burn the money, but like, is it better if I save that for something else, right?
Well, the me is be like, do I continue to listen to Trump when he talks in public, or do I turn the TV off?
I think for everyone's sanity, no one should listen to any politician speak. I think if you wanted to be the healthiest person on the planet, you should ignore anything that's news flavored because it's just disgusting. So, like, let's ignore those people and let's focus on the good people in our real life, you
Well,
know?
one positive way to resolve the conflict when I listen to someone be so disrespectful of other people, it reminds me be respectful of all people.
Yeah.
That's how I resolve that conflict.
No, I mean, we can certainly learn from our conflicts for sure, because
Right,
sometimes our
for sure.
conflicts are, in many cases, our conflicts are actually trying to tell us something,
Now,
right?
there's another category that I came up with outside of conflict, because you're right, we go back to conflicts if you want, because there's all kinds of conflicts that are normal, happen every day.
Yeah,
Some that are much more difficult to deal with than others. And actually, we may not even know what the conflict is inside of us,
yeah,
but it's still eating at it. Parts of it are coming to our minds, and then we're not sleeping, or we're constantly being anxious because we don't even know what is driving that.
yeah.
And so we can feel overwhelmed because we don't know what the conflict is. If trauma, maybe sometimes too with trauma, you don't know that you even got trauma. I go in that category. I didn't know I had trauma for a long time. It came up because of the work I do with people,
Mm,
kind of exposed mine, which was painful at best and
mm,
helpful to my patients better. But there's another category, and I call it the belief category. Some beliefs
mm.
can leave you feeling overwhelmed. Example, global warming. Now people are saying, well, it's not really going to kill anybody. But for years they were saying, man, this world's going to end quickly here if we don't do something about it. It scared a bunch of people. So a whole bunch of people, young people, decided either not get married and particularly not to have kids.
Mm.
All because of that belief system that the world was pouring into the world, that the end is coming because of global warming.
Yeah, I would
That's
say
a
it's a
powerful.
It's a little more than that though, because I think it was
Okay. Yeah.
that kind of rhetoric in combination with like a lot of financial issues from 2008 until the present and the
Yeah.
pandemic and
Yeah.
like
True.
all
Good
these
point.
things. I think all these things kind of
Good
built
point.
like, I think the millennial folks that are younger than myself and then the Gen Z kids, etc., grew up in an environment where it's just kind of like a bunch of bad stuff is just going to keep happening,
Yeah. What's the point?
essentially. So
Right.
what's the point?
Fear. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the world may end because of global warming. We may die from a virus. Fear. So why build a family? Why have children? Bring children to this world?
Yeah,
It's a great example. Yeah.
and I think it's more than just beliefs, but I think beliefs are at the core of it, right? So
Right.
if your core belief is what's the point, right? I mean, that can underlie clinical problems like major depressive disorder or non-clinical problems like just having a screwed up belief about yourself and the world, which isn't really necessarily clinical. Like we can have really mistaken beliefs about ourselves and that'll really screw us up for sure. And so the
Right.
one of the best solutions to screwed up beliefs is new experiences. New experiences and meaningful relationships. So therapy obviously can be good for that. However, I really would like to make a pitch for the ordinary good people in our life that we take for granted, because you and I have talked about this offline a bunch in the
Oh, yeah.
last 5 years. Like there's so many good people in my life,
Amen.
including present company, and
Thanks.
and it's so weird how you can learn to not appreciate these people. you know?
You can take people for granted very easily that are very, very important and powerful in your life. But actually, I have that in the area of what do you do about? You're right into the next area, actually, right on. You're into relationship, and how can that help you with not to help you not feel overwhelmed,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
because I think relationships are some of the most transformative experiences people have while they're alive. I mean, there's like psychedelics or whatever, but the truth of the matter is, it's when we do not value the people in our life, we're gonna be more messed up. When we take people for granted or we, excessively objectify them or compartmentalize them in a way that they're
Right?
only good for work or they're only good for X activity, right? This is my gym buddy and that's all he's good for. Like they're definitely nice guys I meet at the gym, but I don't think of them as one dimensional. It's like I see you at the gym and we talk in the steam room or you help me with my form or whatever it is. It's like these are real
Right?
people who are fascinating people, by the way, who are like they're
Yeah.
they do their best to get personal, but like it's the gym, but like they're really
Right.
interesting people,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so like I was literally in the sauna this morning after working out, and I was talking to this guy that I've known for like 2 years here, and he's this fascinating guy who's like a finance dude and he does a bunch of investing, but he also has an avocado farm on his little
That's cool.
big
Yeah.
big plot of
Yeah.
land. But then
Uh-huh.
his kid, his adolescent son is into jujitsu and he's like crushing it there. And so there's like all these interesting things about him, but like we also have these really interesting like man-to-man experiences where we talk about like God, how did we get here and what is it like being a dad and how did you and like it's not just bro talk,
Right.
if that makes sense. It is in many cases, but also he's like he wants to have a real relationship and that's pretty fucking amazing because I'm just some random person, you know, like he could just ignore me. He really could. Like it in the gym, in the locker room, on the floor. It's not really a social expectation that you're there to chat. But for whatever reason, we get along, we have a good time, and like that's super cool. It's not earth-shattering, but it's a really
Oh,
important relationship, you know?
no, people will tell you. I listen obviously to a lot of stories over the years, right? And people will tell you it could be an encounter with someone in an airplane or an airport,
Yeah,
a gym,
yeah.
church, a bar, even, and
Well,
all kind of places where an encounter that you didn't expect to happen can lead to some kind of relationship that helps you feel less alone. And
yeah,
that can help you if we're talking about feeling overwhelmed. That's the key to it. I believe there's a couple of keys in not feeling overwhelmed and things you can do about it. And you're already hitting on one of the big ones, which is the real
relationships.
relationship. Yeah, relationships, a good relationship, but there's a catch with relationships since you've gotten into it. A lot of people will go share a problem with someone, a
Mm,
conflict, even I guess
hmm.
trauma even could be possible, or a belief system that's really
Yeah,
wrecking their life.
yeah,
And they can tell someone in great detail, and maybe the person says a good listener. A lot of people are horrible listeners in the world. They want to talk, they don't want to listen. So they use what you say as a way to open up to talk about what they want to. But if it's,
yeah.
let's assume you find a good listener, someone that really tries to pay attention to what you're saying. Even in that case, a lot of people walk away feeling as bad, sometimes worse than what they felt when they walked into the relationship, into the conversation for a good reason. Do you know what it is?
Shame.
It can be shame. Shame would block you from being able to take the caring of someone else, could
That's what I'm
block you
saying.
from taking it in.
That's what I'm
So you
saying.
could walk in and have a really good conversation and feel worse when you walk out because of shame.
Correct.
But there's a transaction that happens in attachment that I was really thinking about. But you're right about
Mm,
shame, and there could be other things too that get in the way. Even conflicts can get in the way of taking something good from someone
yeah,
who really listens well to you.
yeah.
You know, one of the issues of attachment, because we know people, part of the reason people feel overwhelmed is because they feel a sense of aloneness.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when you don't feel alone, the old joke is a problem shared is cut in half. Well, it's not necessarily true. That's what we're talking about. So in attachment, a mom is supposed to take the pain of a child, emotional, physical pain, and absorb that pain, digest it for them, and the child then feels better, feels less fear, feels less hurt, feels less physical pain if they scrape their knee or, injured their elbow or whatever it might be playing. And in a good attachment, that's what happens. And the
Mm,
child feels better. And then they learn from that experience that
mm,
when people listen, they can take my pain away. They
mm.
can take the fear, they can take the hurt, they can take those things and help them feel better. But people that didn't have that experience, and there are a lot of them in the world that have had dysfunctional attachments growing up. You probably know the statistic on that. The old one I heard was really high, like 40 some percent, or poor
Yeah,
attachments, 45 or whatever it was. And that's a lot of people not getting that experience of feeling like someone can take the pain away. And I'm not saying that later in life, as you grow up, you don't find those people, because you may find those people too and have some experience of that. But many
yeah,
people go into a relationship, a talk with someone, hoping to feel better and feel the same or worse when they leave. And worse usually is because they expected to feel better and they didn't feel better, so they feel worse, because of it. So that issue is very important if you're looking to feel better, to not feel overwhelmed. Well, you want to not feel alone. Well, part of
yeah.
that, the real relationship is it a relationship first where someone's really going to listen, not talk, not just try and get their words in and talk about what they want to, but really listen to you, take you seriously. And then can you really feel like they really get you? They really care about you. And that's that maternal attachment stuff, and really life is so important. So some people really, if they really were failed there in that area, it's going to be hard to talk to people and feel better. Now, I don't say don't
Yeah,
talk to people, but it makes it more
yeah.
difficult for some people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say there. So there's actually so many places to go. The
Yeah.
one of the challenges,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
one of the big challenges is that, we're talking about something that's infinitely more complicated, even though it sounds very simple. So it's
Oh,
like
yeah. Oh, yeah.
the simple version of this conversation is, if you just talk to people, you'll feel better, which is kind of true. Probably more often than not, you'll feel a little bit better, right?
Mhm.
But what you're talking about is this very layered thing of like, what are all the reasons that you want to feel better, and what are all the reasons that you don't want to feel better?
True.
And then,
That's true too.
which is an inherently bigger, deeper thing. But then layered into that is like your personality style and
Oh,
your
yeah. Oh,
and your
yeah.
attachment style and your intellect and your culture and all these things, right? Because there are simple things that, like, if people are using phrases and euphemisms you're not aware of when they're talking to you, you're going to feel alone. And that's on the simple side of things, right? So it's a different
Right.
generation
Right.
or whatever. But on the more complicated side, like, let's pick a couple of simple personality variables. So let's just say you're an extremely open person, like you score very high on trait openness. And the person you're talking to scores very low on trait openness. They're like a car mechanic or whatever it is. And so, like, because you score high on trait openness, you're going to have a harder time in many cases talking to simpler people who don't have this like breadth of experiences and interests. Because if you're interested in food from France and China and all these things and all this crap, because that's how you're built, you're oriented in the world that way, and the person you're talking to
Yeah.
just absolutely
Yeah.
loves the burgers they cook every night or something, like, that's going to be a lonely experience, right? Like, you should never talk to me about food because I couldn't give two shits about some specific thing that's super fascinating. Like, I'm not that guy. I can learn about it and be curious about it, but I'm never going to get excited about that. That's just not who I am as a person. And so you're going to be lonely talking to me about food, for instance, as an easy example. Because although I score fairly
Right.
high on trait openness, it for the life of me, it doesn't click that I should care. But if you talk to me about cars, I can tell you all sorts of insane
Yes, you can.
details about
Audience,
different
yes, you
models.
can. Yes, you
So
can.
it's so like I can go there and you'll never feel alone talking with me about cars. But food, who knows? So like there's that too. There's personality differences. there's your attachment style, and like in many ways,
Yeah.
Bowlby thought that attachment style was more like kind of like a personality organization. It was more like a lens. It wasn't necessarily like you have to have a secure attachment to be healthy. It was more like it's better generally, but the avoidant types and the ambivalent types can do relationships and be satisfied, but they're going to have a
They
harder
can.
time being satisfied, right?
Well, and then the more difficulties going on, the more difficult it would be for them in particular, right?
Yes.
You
So
know, so
there's,
that's, yeah. So know yourself in a way. You don't really, I
yeah.
mean, the carbon mechanic can maybe talk about some things. Maybe he can't. Maybe that's good that he'll just get things done. We need people to get things done. But when he feels overwhelmed, he may be more in trouble.
Yeah, and so there's all these layers is just my point. It's just like
Right, right,
there's who you are, there's how you orient in the world, there's how you see the world, there's your belief systems. All these things will influence how you tolerate feeling overwhelmed, but also what your expectations are, right? If you grew up in a family where, just as a simple for instance, where nobody had any relationship with feeling overwhelmed. Just everyone was constantly bleeding every last feeling at all times, right? And there are some very high conflict homes where it's like every day uh, people are yelling at each other, or every day people are laughing hysterically, or every feeling is just on full blast at all times. And that happens in some homes. And then some homes are the opposite. They're that Protestant work ethic, like nobody talks about feelings ever because feelings don't matter. And our job is to go do things. And to be a good
right.
kid is to say nothing and do nothing, which many people from your generation grew up in. And
Oh, yeah,
like both of those extremes are usually bad for people because both of those extremes don't actually give you a reasonable role model for like a middle ground of like, yeah, feelings are okay and you can manage them, but also sometimes we get out of control and sometimes it's okay. And like, there's a lot of that too that people don't recognize, like how they grew up
right.
will shape their relationships and expectations about like, what do I do when I'm sad? What do I do when I'm happy? What do I do when I'm angry? Because if you had parents who had no use for sadness, then you would never hear about it. And so it might be kind of literally foreign to you to even think and talk about sadness because, like,
Right, right.
happiness is safe, anxiety is safe, anger is safe, but sadness, not that. And in many families, it's the opposite. Anger is the devil. You are not allowed to express anger because I grew up in a home with
Right,
lots of
right,
anger, and therefore,
right.
if you're angry at all, that's bad and you're bad, right? And so all these things happen to people, and sometimes we don't even fully see how much that happened, right?
Oh, of course not. People can be very unaware of what they internalized growing up.
Yeah.
So they don't really know the characteristics about themselves. I joke sometimes that you used to have extended family in a family, in the home, you might have a grandma or a granddad there that can kind of bring you over and go, you're really angry at your dad or your mom or your brother or your sister. Maybe you need to think about talking to them. Or do you know that you tend to be very impatient and that can get you in trouble? And they help teach kids because parents, a lot of times, good parents are teaching kids about who they are, their personality style, how they communicate, what their sensitivities are, what their strengths are, their weaknesses are. And if you want to not feel overwhelmed, it helps to know who you are so you know kind of what you need when you start feeling overloaded,
Yeah.
i.e., overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But there is one more thing, and I want to get to then a catch-all area for this whole issue, how to deal with being overwhelmed. But there's also one thing I call feeling profoundly alone when you're not.
Mm.
Okay. And this is really important to people. There's so many people that feel a profound or significant sense of loneliness when they're by themselves. And I'm not talking about, I'm by myself a lot here. I don't see as many patients as I used to see, but I don't feel lonely. And I don't feel lonely because, and I look forward to seeing your mom when I get done work, and I look forward to talking to friends, make some calls, things like that. But a lot of people walk around feeling very profoundly alone. And if you feel alone, then you're going to be more easily overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
what I'm talking about a group of people that did not internalize a sense growing up that they're important and valued by
Mm.
other people.
Mm-hmm.
So they never internalize a sense that people are with me in a
Yeah.
positive way. They more easily feel overwhelmed by the conflicts, traumas, belief systems that are negative in the world.
Yeah.
They have a bigger problem than most people have.
Yeah.
So can they cope with it by having good relationship? Yeah. And they can also cope with it by this catch-all coping skills area that we want to talk about last. And you've touched on a lot of those things, but there's all kind of things that when I first got sober, I had no idea. My mind would obsess. It took me half hour, 45 minutes every night to fall asleep, back then. And you guys were alive and kicking at that point when I got sober, you know, and and I had no idea. People say things like live one day at a time. That's a
Mm-hmm.
coping skill that I had no clue that existed. Or, hey, substitute something for what you're thinking, something more positive. Like I used to say, easy does it in my head, the AA slogan. A lot of people go into AA and they go, oh, those things are stupid. Why would I want to say easy does it or one day at a time? And I went in and I was like, you can do that? That's a good way to think. And I'd substitute thoughts for because I'd have these obsessive thoughts of resentment I had towards people. And that would cause me to feel maybe not overwhelmed all the time, but I'd feel not feel good, and it
Mm-hmm.
all contributed to not sleeping well. It all contributed to anxious symptoms, you might say, although I didn't display a lot other than when I broke through in a strong way, which you're well aware of. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, my point is there are a lot of ways to cope that give you
Mm-hmm.
perspective that help contain or reduce feeling overwhelmed. And it
Mm-hmm.
could be simply things like the Serenity Prayer. God grant
Yeah.
me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change. Don't dwell on the things you can't change. Don't obsess about them. It makes you miserable.
Yeah.
Courage to change the things I can. What can I do to actually make it better?
Mm-hmm.
So then I don't feel overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
the wisdom to know the difference. What can I change? What can't I change? Or can I live one day at a time? Will that bring it down to a bite size where I don't have to be overwhelmed by the issue of changing a career, the issue of doing something really hard and having a hard talk with your boss or your spouse or your girlfriend, boy, you know what I'm saying? The hard things that if you have these coping skills, they can work tremendously to help you feel not overwhelmed. Okay.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So and there's a whole litany of these kind of skills. Those are just some examples of things that I learned early on in recovery that helped me a lot. And I began to sleep better fairly quickly when I began to use those things. You mean there's a different way that how to shut off your mind so you're not sitting there laying in bed grinding on stuff, you know? Now, I probably lived in an overwhelmed state constantly, but I compartmentalized so I wasn't aware of a lot of it, and a lot of it didn't interfere, particularly in work. Every Lockwood has the ability to compartmentalize and do a really good job at work.
Mm-hmm.
And things don't break through that compartmentalization at work very often at all, which means we're all really good at work. That's a kind of a trait that we have. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, don't minimize the need for coping skills. Let go and let God, you know, easy does it. Live and let live. If you're trying, somebody won't do what you want them to do, live and let live. Live your
Mm-hmm.
life, let them live their life. Not all conflicts are solvable. Sometimes acceptance is the key. So many things like that can help people cope better and not feel overwhelmed by whatever the issue is, conflict, trauma, whatever the issue is, belief system that causes a lot of negative feelings like fear, etc. Try and use those coping skills. And there's many books, many things you can podcasts, all kind of things you can find solutions to those kind of coping skills that give you power to not feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think when you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, obviously it'd be good to figure out yourself and who you are and why you're overwhelmed and all those things. I think that's a good first step. And that could take time and you'll get better and better awareness the more you pay attention. But I think
Right.
on the practical side of this, I think The way I've always broken this down for people, both my patients and
Mm,
my grad students that I teach, I think I think of I think of what you're describing as coping in three different categories. So I think there's
okay.
distracting, I think there's coping, and I think there's tolerating.
Okay.
Okay. So distracting is where you do something to essentially avoid for a brief period of time. Emphasis on the word brief, right?
Nice.
So
Real nice.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
so when you're distracting
Consciously.
yourself,
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to
Yeah.
consciously distract yourself. You're going to make a choice to do
Right.
something to distract yourself, whether it's something physical, like in the classic DBT world. They've got all these cool distraction skills like the rubber band on the wrist or the face in
Right.
the bucket of ice water, which all work phenomenally well. Like there's no human from any part of the world anywhere that couldn't do the face in the bucket of water and reorient in 5 seconds. It just will. It just absolutely will change you in less than like 10 seconds. And that's
Right on.
distraction. And
Right on.
distractions
Yeah.
typically like advertise in treatment as distress tolerance, and that's fine. And so distraction is important because distraction gets us out of a super hyper dysregulated state so we can feel more in control temporarily. That's all it's good for.
Hey, it's a great thing you bring up because in trauma, if you got trauma, the extreme of feeling overwhelmed, if you sincerely get your mind on something else and begin to really focus on it, the trauma will calm down. It will go away.
Yeah, the reliving experience,
Reliving, yeah,
etc. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So that's distraction, and I can't say enough good things about distraction. The problem with distraction, though, is people will do it for too long. People will avoid for
Of
too long.
course, you betcha.
And
Yeah,
distraction can turn into pathological avoidance easily. And so that's the caveat there. So distract
yeah,
temporarily, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, maybe a couple of minutes, but that's it.
right.
You calm down enough that you feel a little more in control again, you can make decisions again. So there's distraction and then there's coping. So
Okay,
coping, in my opinion, this is the way I kind of interpret things.
sure.
Coping is where you're making a specific choice about a specific internal thought or feeling or whatever, and you're making a choice to have a more calm experience, but not avoid your feelings. So it's not distraction. You're going to sit with your anger and you're going to try to calm it down, but not get rid of it, right?
Right, right.
Which is different than avoiding it. You're not going to distract
Absolutely.
yourself.
Yeah,
You're going to be staring it directly in the face, metaphorically, and doing some diaphragmatic breathing or whatever skills you're learning from your clinician or counselor or whatever to
sure.
sit with it, but also minimize it, right? So coping has the specific goal of sitting with the feeling, not getting rid of it or distracting it, but also decreasing the intensity of it so it becomes more manageable. So there's distracting, there's coping, and then there's tolerating. Tolerating is the
Ah,
hardest thing for every person to do, myself included, because all of us are quick to either distract or cope, in my experience. That's just my experience. Maybe it's not the same for you. So my experience, both professionally and personally, is, and with my friends and everyone else, is it's
yeah.
easier and cheaper to distract or cope. It is. It's easier and cheaper. Whereas tolerating means you're going to directly experience the emotional thing you don't want to experience, and you're going to do nothing except be aware that it's happening and remind yourself that you can handle it. That's tolerating. And tolerating is nothing like distracting and nothing like coping.
Tolerating by your category would be the step before being able to use what's going on, use your feeling as a guide to what's going on to help solve a problem, a conflict, an issue. If you can sit with it, like anger, people will say, don't let the sun go down in your anger. Well, they mean really what they mean is resolve it. And what resolve means to me is anger is a trigger. It says something's wrong.
Yeah.
So we take it to, if you can sit with it like that and use it, all right, what's bothering me? And you had a patient here today, their horrible management of the place he works at, just really incompetent, short staffed, demanding long hours. just a lot of anger about all that. And the anger's the trigger that says, what's wrong here? Well, all these things are wrong,
Hmm.
which makes it really hard to work there because you don't get time off you need. And, you're having to work 80 hours a week when you don't want to make money, that much money right now, or work that hard. And you're afraid they're understaffed. So you got more responsibility, maybe too much, and it puts them at risk for what they're doing, the job they're doing. The anger is a good touch point to say something's wrong. What
Mm.
do I do? Because you can get overwhelmed if you just stay stuck in it versus using the anger to go, how do I solve this?
Yeah.
And then it's really effective. And that's the proper use of anger. I say to people, if I step on your toe, I'm 230. If I step on your toe, your anger is going to get me off your toe, but it's not what happens first. What happened first was it hurt your toe. And it's intimidating to have someone stepping around your toe be right in your face. So you want them off, and the anger says, get off. Well, it hurts, and it's scary for you to be that close to that size. You know what I'm saying? So the anger is useful for that purpose.
Yeah.
So again, it's all part of that third category of yours. If you can sit with it, you can do something with it. If you can't, you just react or you distract, then you're not necessarily going to solve what leaves you feeling overwhelmed. And
Mm.
that's the key, how to solve what leads you to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any
I
other
was just
thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like knowing when to use which of those three things is really complicated. It's not super simple because we are complicated, right? So like
Well, yeah,
we are complicated and the circumstance is often complicated. And so I don't want anyone to leave this discussion with a very oversimplified view of their anger, their sadness, their shame, whatever they're feeling that's overwhelming them, because
right.
if you oversimplify it, you might not give yourself the respect you deserve. And that's what I want to make sure everyone understands is that some of your feelings are more situational, right? Someone cuts you off in traffic.
Right.
That probably
Right.
doesn't have to do with your mom and your dad when you were two. But it just,
Oh,
no
but I'll
disrespect.
guarantee you because of what happened with your mom or dad, some people really react in traffic differently than other people do.
I knew you would say that. And so like, but the truth of the matter is getting cut off in traffic annoys all of us, and we don't need to do
Oh, well,
psychoanalysis
yeah,
5 times a week or whatever.
yeah.
But if it is something that it's more like enduring, right? So a good metric I use for people is if the problem you're facing, if the overwhelm you're facing is enduring, it happens across different situations, across different people, then it's probably something you need to take more seriously because there's a crystal clear pattern there. So when you take yourself seriously and give yourself the respect you deserve, certain
Amen.
things can be simple and
Yep.
certain things aren't simple. And let the
Yep.
simple things be the simple ones where it's like they cut me off, that guy's an asshole. And then like, I for some reason can't speak up at work and I can't speak up at home and I can't speak up with my friends. And like that is not
Right.
the same thing, you know,
Right.
just as
Right.
two extreme examples.
No, I think that's a great way to end this. That there are degrees of feeling overwhelmed, different intensity of solutions to that. You can read, you can listen to podcasts, get ideas all over the place and how all the skills you talked about, the three categories, and if it's serious and you find yourself stuck in stuff that really overwhelms you consistently for a long duration that makes you really miserable, then go get some help.
Yeah.
Go get some help. But we want to throw out some ideas that there are solutions so you don't have to go through life feeling overwhelmed unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all going to feel overwhelmed at times, but not
Yeah.
unnecessarily, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, well, this is it for today.
Thanks for listening to Encouragement for Living Life. We hope you were encouraged by today's discussion. If you have a question, you can email us at lockwoodwithlockwood@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer it on one of our shows. Hope to see you next time.